One of life's greatest questions is what happens to us after we die? Is death the end or a new beginning? Welcome to the Round Trip Death Podcast. In this show, we listen to first-hand accounts of people who have gone beyond the veil and return to talk about it. Today, our featured guest not only had an interesting near-death experience, but one of the most spectacular accidents you will ever hear, as he was actually run over by a large Navy ship in the freezing Antarctic Ocean. How did it happen? And how did he make it back? We are about to find out. So we are honored to have with us today on the podcast, Greg Keily from Australia. Greg, how are you?
Absolutely fantastic, Eric. Thank you for the opportunity. I'm looking forward to sharing my experience, and hopefully it might help some people get through some struggles that they have been, as I did from mine.
Would you mind giving us, before you tell us what led up to your near-death experience, tell us just a little bit about you and your background so we can get to know you some.
Yeah, fantastic. All right. Well, I was born in Sydney, Australia, back in 1968, and grew up a child of the 80s in Australia, which was pretty cool. Normal sort of a family. It wasn't until much later in adult life that I found out that I had what was called a narcissistic father. However, that led to pretty much the NDE that we'll talk about, and my careers, many careers. I ended up having about 41 career changes in my life through this self-sabotage. One of them, which was in the military, which we'll talk about, and where the NDE occurred. I've moved all the way up the east coast of Australia, up and back, and now I live in a place called the Sunshine Coast, which is I suppose similar to the Florida sort of a weather, but it's got lots of lovely surf beaches, and I surf every single day for my own mental health, and absolutely love it. I've got a very patient wife of 25 years who went through all my turmoils of self-sabotage, and she's still there, which is fantastic. And I've got two boys. One's 21 and the other one's 18.
Wow, surfing every day, that's not a bad life. And it's winter down there right now. So does that mean you have bigger waves?
We do have bigger waves, and we get to wear a wetsuit, but it's the best. This is why I moved here. I've moved all the way up and down the east coast of Australia, been over to the west coast a couple of times, and that's where this NDE took place. But it is bigger waves in the winter, and I absolutely just love it. It helps me be grounded. And it's something I think everyone should do, is find something that they love and be able to do it as much as they can, because it's amazing how much more happier life becomes.
I could not agree more. That's fantastic. Before you get into the lead up to your NDE, would you mind just almost giving us a little teaser, just a teeny glint as to what you saw or experienced in your NDE without telling us the whole story? And then we're going to get to the lead up, because the lead up is absolutely amazing. For people that haven't heard your story, you are going to be blown away with what happened to Greg. So tease us first.
All right. Actually, I had ended up having two in the one evening, and you'll understand it when I go into more depth. I did see and feel other entities, but they weren't from this life. It must have been from another time, another place. And the biggest thing that I took away from it was the love that I felt there. And I was sort of torn. I had absolutely no control of which direction I was going, but the lead up to it will definitely allow me to explain it in much more detail.
Okay. I'll let you fill in more details in a few minutes. You were in the Royal Australian Navy. Set the stage. What in the world happened?
All right. So I joined the Royal Australian Navy as a clearance diver, and it's similar to your Navy SEALs over there. And we did a lot of undership underwater ship attacks. We did deep water mine clearances, explosives. We did a lot of dry land explosive ordnance disposal. And we've got a couple of different ranks and different entities in different militaries. So I suppose the clearance diver is classified as a special forces in the Navy. And I got to work with some of the most amazing men in the Army, and they have what was called the SAS Regiment, Special Air Service Regiment, that are the elite of Australia's military. And I managed to work with them for 6 months over in Western Australia, the other side. And we went over there, did a lot of workups, jumping out of helicopters, a lot of ships boarding. So our task was to head down from Western Australia all the way down to the Antarctic Ocean, because Australia's waters, Australian waters down there in the Antarctic Ocean. And there's a lot of illegal vessels down there, trafficking, fishing, doing things that they shouldn't. And we were the first mission to go down there with a combined Army and Navy. So I'll set the scene for you. It's 2 a.m. in the morning. The seas are huge. I believe I was told they were 17-metre seas, so they were much higher than the ship. It was so cold that when the waves would hit the side of the hull of the ship, the water would instantly freeze. So it sort of looked like it was snowing upwards. It was quite a bizarre event and an experience. Now, at 2 a.m., we get the call that we have to get to boarding stations. So because of it was so cold, we couldn't go by helicopter because the rotors were all frosted up. So what we would do is they would launch a boat off the Navy frigate, off the ship, and it was called a rigid inflatable boat, a RIB. And they would lower it down. It was probably about 20 foot long, and it had these seats in it that everyone sat behind each other. And basically we would end up going from the top of the Navy ship down into the boat. And so they'd lower the boat into the water by a crane. The guys would drive it to the side of the ship, and then they would lower a line to the front of the boat. And they had a bowman, a guy up the front. He would clip on the rope, and then the guy that was driving the boat would take the accelerator off the engine, and the boat would pull up alongside the ship, because the ship was still doing about 10 knots, which is about 10 miles per hour through this massive sea. So if you can imagine the ship's going at 10 knots and this small boat's being pulled alongside it, does that make sense?
Yes, but I cannot imagine them doing this in, you said 17-meter waves, so that's like 50 feet, if my math is right. 50-foot waves in a little tiny, what we call a Zodiac kind of boat.
Yeah, it could take probably about 11 or 12 people sitting back to front or front to back. And there's a center console where a guy would be driving it. It had two big engines on the back.
That's insane. They couldn't wait for it to calm down a little bit.
I don't know what happened up at the top there with the decisions. I was just one of the fellas that had to do the job. But I do understand what you're saying. It's a fair question to ask.
I get it. That's just crazy. You know, we think of these super tough Australian guys, and there you were. I mean, you know, you're probably eating snakes for dinner and stuff.
It was definitely a challenge, and like anyone that might be ex-military or emergency services, police, you know, or paramedics or fire, when you're trained to do something, you just do it. You don't sit there and try and rationalize. You just have to do it. So anyway, what we would do is we had to get from the top of the Navy ship, the frigate, down into the boat that's being towed alongside, and it's going up and down with the big waves, obviously. But the rope that it's attached to is pulling it alongside the ship. So it's sort of sucked in alongside the ship as the ship's going forward. Now, usually you see people that would climb down a ladder to a boat that's being towed alongside, but it takes too long. And, of course, with the boat going up and down so much, we had to compromise and get into the boat as fast as possible. So you may have seen on the news or with the military throwing out of a helicopter, it's called a fast rope. It's a really thick, fluffy rope, and they throw it down. So we've got it from the top of the Navy frigate going down the side of the ship, and the end of the rope sits in the boat that's being towed alongside. So we would jump off the side of the ship and fly down, more almost like a controlled or a directional descent, and we would land at the bottom of the boat, and then that person would move to the back, and then the next guy would jump down. So it was like, they call it a stick of guys just flying down. And so you go from, it was about 30 feet drop, and you couldn't stop because the rope's wet, but it guides you. Instead of jumping overboard, it guides you into the boat that's being towed alongside. You following?
Yeah, I was wondering, I was going to ask you how high that was, but you told us that's 30 feet. Now, of course, when the waves go down, that's probably even a little bit higher, but okay. So you've got it.
Yeah.
How cold is the water, by the way?
Don't know, but it was probably around the zero temperature, around the 0 to 2 degrees maybe. To combat the weather, we had to wear big snowsuits. So we had a big snowsuits on, big heavy boots. We had automatic weapons in a rifle format. Plus I had pistols, quite a lot of ammunition. I also had a backpack on which had 3 days rations. So when we took the ship, we could stay on it. And then I also had a large sledgehammer strapped to my back to bash in doors in case we had to get into locked compartments and commandeer the ship to take control of it and then guide it back to Australia, the land. So I was very heavily laden with equipment.
Yeah, how much does all that weigh, would you say?
I don't. If I had to guess, it would probably be around 20 to 30 kilos on top of my body weight.
Okay. So another 50, 60 pounds. Okay. Plus the big suit you're wearing.
Yeah. So you'll understand why this all happened with this big suit that I was wearing when I go into my story a bit more.
So you're about to jump, grab a rope that's wet, icy, and just very gradually go down to the nice little boat.
Yeah, it sounds good. So there was 2 boats. So the first lot of guys, about 7 of them or 8 of them, they jump into the first boat, and then the guy on the sailor on the helm that's driving it would motor it forward, and the guy at the front, the bow, would unclip the hook that's hooked onto the boat, and they then would pull away from the ship and then go to the rear and sit behind the back of the ship on the stern, right, and follow behind it. Then they lowered a second boat, which would do the same. They drove up alongside it, hooked on the shackle at the front, and then it's called sweating back. They just take the throttle off and it pulls the boat alongside. And as luck would have it, I'm the first man down that rope into the second boat. So I look at the guy next to me who's in charge. He gives me a chop with his hand. He goes, "Right, go, Greg." So I jump out overboard and start flying down this rope. Now, the universe works in mysterious ways. So the side of the ship was struck by an incredibly large wave, which hit the boat that was being towed alongside and pushed it outwards as I was sliding down the rope. And the shackle that was pulling that small boat alongside snapped. So it started going backwards, and the rope then went out of the boat into the water, and so I flew all the way from the top 30 foot down straight into the Antarctic Ocean, and I was hanging on the side of the rope, getting towed alongside the ship at 10 miles an hour. So I'm hanging on this rope, and I'm looking up at this massive grey wall in front of me, which is the side of the ship, and I'm seeing all these bodies up there starting to panic because I've gone overboard. And I'm hanging on to the rope, getting towed alongside with all that weight, the snowsuit filling up with water, all the boots and all that sort of stuff. And the guy that was in the little boat that was being towed alongside, he's seen what's happened. So he accelerates and brings the boat up right next to me as I'm being towed alongside the ship. And the bowman, who's at the front of the boat, is yelling at me to let go of the rope I'm hanging on to and hang on to the side of the boat. So I did that because I was slowly going under. And so I let go of that and I hung on to the side of the boat. Now, what he should have done, the guy that was driving it, is stop, right? But he didn't. He kept going forwards, and in which case I was getting towed along the front of the boat and my body was going under the boat. Does that make sense?
It's terrifying.
So I'm looking up at this guy, and he's saying, "Don't let go." He's screaming at me, "Don't let go." But I'm weighted down. We're doing 10 knots and I'm getting dragged under the boat. My fingers slowly start prying open, and I'm looking up at this guy in my last ditch hope, and my fingers just let go and I go underwater. So I remember going underwater, and it was so cold that my body automatically just gasped, and I sucked in a lot of freezing cold water, which felt like it was freezing my throat. And I popped up on the surface, coughing up all the water that I'd swallowed by that time. And I looked around, and the boat that I went under was gone. He'd bugged out, and I was alongside the ship. So the ship's sailing along, and there's me sitting in the water next to it. And I remember seeing this massive grey wall in front of me, and I've looked down the side of it, and I saw this huge churning of foam at the back of the ship where the propellers are turning. So the propellers rotate outside in, and I'm going towards it. I'm trying to push myself out. Panic's starting to come into my thought process here that I'm about to get chopped up by the propellers. So I'm wearing all this gear. I'm pushing away from the ship, but because it's moving forward, the wave of the ship is just sucking me into the side of the hull. Yeah?
Sure.
So I'm getting quite close to this foaming at the back of the ship, the stern there, and the panic's starting to really take me, and all of a sudden I get sucked underwater by the propellers. So instant blackness because it's night time. My eyeballs were freezing. I was sucking in a lot of water, and I was thrashing my arms and legs as hard and fast as I could, as we do through you go through the fight, the flight, or the freeze mode. I was fighting for my life at this stage. I get sucked under the ship, and the ball of my right foot hits something hard. So it must have been the hull, and I pushed off with all my might. And all of a sudden I felt this freedom, like I was no longer getting churned around like I was in a washing machine. And so I started struggling with my arms upwards to the top of the surface of the water, and I popped up on the surface at 2 a.m. in 17 metre squeeze, and I remember seeing the back of the Navy ship slowly leaving me. And I felt this relief because I hadn't been chopped up by the propellers.
Yeah, I have a feeling I know what's coming next.
Yeah, so you can imagine. I was all of a sudden I felt quite free of that, and I felt quite relieved. And then reality came back with, how am I going to stay up on the surface here? So I start trying to tread water with my arms and my legs. I've got my weapons, my backpack, my sledgehammer, my suit, which is really heavy. And I had communications in my ear, and I could hear the panic on all the people on the ship saying, "Man overboard." And they were talking to the guys in the small boats that they'd left behind. And I heard them saying, "We can see him, we can see him. We've identified him." And I'm turning around on the top of the water, trying to stay above it, but trying to see them. And then I've seen them in the distance, this boat, and it's the first boat. It's full of the guys that were in it. And they come flying towards me. They're going to rescue me, okay? However, the seas are so big, he's surfing down the side of this wave, totally uncontrollable, and he's run straight over the top of me. And I had on like a little it's called a Pro-Tech helmet. It's a little bit of foam helmet. He's hit that and pushed me underwater, and the propeller's gone over and clipped the top of the helmet there, and it's probably pushed me a couple of meters, which is, I don't know what, about 5-6 feet underwater. And I started sucking in a lot of water, struggling to get back to the surface. So I got back to the surface. Panic was just, it was uncontrollable, the panic. There's just the fight for your life sort of mode. I got back up to the surface. I was coughing and spluttering, and I heard on this communications in my ear, the boat I was supposed to get in, they've now seen me, and they say, "We can get him." Same things happen. They've run straight over me and pushed me under. So I've been dunked. I'm like a tea bag getting dunked underneath the Antarctic Ocean here in the cold water. And I struggled back up to the surface, found my way up to the top there, and I've seen the two boats. They're circling me now, trying to do the best they can in this uncontrollable water to get to me. And I'm looking at them, going around in circles myself, trying to keep an eye on them, and it was like everything just started slowing down. My arms became very heavy because of the cold, and all my joints started stiffening up. Because what tends to happen is when we go and are submerged into extreme cold, the blood leaves our extremities and congregates around our organs to try and protect us. So all of a sudden, I feel that it's very difficult to tread water. And my head keeps going underwater. I'm drinking a lot of water. I'm struggling to get back up. This lasted what seemed to be 10 weeks, right? But it was only about 4 or 5 minutes, I believe. Kept going on. And then I couldn't get back up to the surface. It was as if I could see the reflection on the water. It was like the moon or something was up there, and it was just beyond reach. It was like I was struggling to get above the water, and it was a different world up there. So, and my joints had just stopped working, so I started sinking.
Don't you have some kind of a life jacket on?
I did. I had what's called a Special Forces life jacket on, and it only works if you pull the toggle. So during my time, good question that actually, during my time of struggling up the top, I was trying to find the toggle, but when I had got sucked under the ship, and it had all ripped. So it was all torn anyway. And I couldn't find that. So good question, because it was going through my mind, where is this bloody jacket, right? So anyway, I'm sinking and I'm sucking in a lot of water. My eyes are open, blackness because of the water. And I remember my throat, it was as if I was sucking in this freezing cold liquid that was freezing my throat. And the panic was extreme. It was the worst it could ever be. And then this was my first trip to the quantum side. Was I found this calmness come over me, and it was as if I had been all of a sudden wrapped in this warm blanket, and I felt this warmth and this comfort that the panic, there's no need panicking anymore. It's just everything's okay. And so as I was sinking down, I felt as if this black liquid, like this, it came over my eyes, as if it went from the blackness of the water to a much deeper darkness, but the calmness throughout that as well. And I went to a place that I can only describe as being a transitional place between life and quantum or death, whatever you want to call it. And it was calm. It was just so calm. Blackness. I didn't see any lights or anything like that. It was just this calmness and this relief and release. And what I felt at that stage, and I only started understanding this when I started telling the story many years later, I started to understand that I didn't actually exist as Greg Keily. I'd had experienced things and I had appreciated them in my life, but it's as if Greg Keily didn't exist. Does that make sense? It's like I was going to this other side and I didn't have any thoughts of family, friends, or me or what I looked like or anything. It was just experiences in life. So that seemed to have lasted a long time, that blackness. And then almost as if someone shone a light in my eyes, I'm on the boat, the first boat of guys, and they're all standing above me, and I've come back to life wherever I was.
Right. How did you get to onto the boat?
So they're going around me, and I start sinking, going off on my own journey. They jump in the water. Two of them jump in the water. They create what's like a human chain, arm to leg. And they've created this chain underneath the water, and they're thrashing around in the blackness. And one of the guys, whose name was Matt, he grabs the back of my backpack in the blackness, grabs it, pulls himself up to the next guy, and they pull all of them back up onto the surface. The boat stopped, and there's 7 or 8 of them. They lift me out of the water. I'm unconscious wherever I am, into the boat. And then they all get back in the boat and I come back. So all of a sudden I'm back on the boat, and it's as if where I'd just been and what had just happened didn't happen. It was, okay, here we are. Let's go on the mission. Let's get this boat. I'm saying to the other guys, okay, let's go. What's going on? Not knowing what just happened. So I didn't really acknowledge what had happened. And they're talking, saying to the Bain frigate, the ship, to the officers, saying he wants to continue on the mission. Can we keep going? And they said, no, you bring him back. So my boat comes alongside, the one I missed. I stand up, get over from this boat onto the other one, which apparently you shouldn't do, and I'll talk to you about that in a second. Because remembering that all my blood had left my extremities and gathered around my organs to try and keep them going for as long as possible. So when you have what's called hypothermia and your body temperature drops, this is what your blood does. So getting up, moving around, creates the blood to leave the organs and get back to the extremities, your hands and your feet. And usually you would drop dead from shock because the blood then leaves it, your body goes into shock, and you die. However, this didn't happen to me. I was totally oblivious to all the safety procedures, and let's go get this ship, because that's how you're trained, okay? I didn't even know that I'd screwed up the mission, which I suffered for later. I got ridiculed for many years after that. But I just thought, okay, we've got to keep going. So the boat comes alongside. They winch it back up to the ship. I climb over the side, and there's all these officers there, male and female, and they throw me into the wardroom, which is their main room, like their lounge, and they've created an emergency area there. And they've taken my temperature, and my body temperature was 34 degrees Celsius. Now, normally we sit at 37 degrees Celsius. I don't know what temperature that is in Fahrenheit.
To Fahrenheit is 93.2 degrees.
Right.
So
well done.
you were a good 5+ degrees in Fahrenheit lower than you should be. Okay.
So they're obviously stressing about this, and so they start taking off all my gear, and then comes my next experience where I just drop to the ground and become unresponsive. So that's what they see. What happened with me is I don't remember falling to the ground. All of a sudden, I transitioned straight back to where I was in that blackness. But this time, I see, I feel. I didn't really. I could see silhouettes. I close my eyes, I can go back there because this is what I do now. I do a lot of hypnotherapy and unconscious coaching, so I can close my eyes and go back there, and I see the silhouettes of a lot of figures, and they may have been 12 or 13 of them, almost in a line, and they're pointing away from me past them towards this other darkness. And I could feel what they were saying. They were so excited. There was such excitement there, as if I was coming back from being away. And I felt this overwhelming love of just, it's hard to explain, but I felt this overwhelming love that I'm finally back where I should be. You know what I mean? It's like, thank you, Greg didn't exist. It was like I said before, same thing. I didn't exist in this life. I didn't see my body. I didn't see the people in it. I just felt these entities there. They're very big, very tall, and they were from somewhere else, not from this life. I just had no connection with this life at all. I started getting like I was drifting towards them. There was no control, as I mentioned at the start of this. I was just going towards them, and there was just such intense love. It wasn't inside me. It was sort of all around me. It was everywhere. And it was like they were applauding and clapping and saying, yeah, come with us, come back. And I was just going in that direction. Then I started hearing a voice. And the voice was so soothing. And I might get a bit emotional here every time I talk about this voice. It was a voice that was saying, it's okay, you can come back now. Sorry, I get a bit emotional. So every time I talk about it, I can hear it, and it's, you can come back to us now, come back. And it was so soft and so much love in this voice, but it wasn't in the direction that they were leading me. It was as if it was in over mountains and mountains and mountains of distance away. And there wasn't mountains, there wasn't light, it was just darkness. And I felt myself pause, and that voice just was so amazingly attractive to me and loving to me that it just got louder and closer, and it kept repeating over and over. It's okay, darling was coming in. Darling, it's okay, you can come back. And, sorry, I'm about to cry as I'm saying this. And it was so intense. And all of a sudden I start feeling some things in my body, and I'm feeling a stroking on my right hand, and that voice was just over and over. And it actually was a female officer that was talking to me and guiding me back. It was just amazing. And as I felt her, it was almost as if it was on my right side, because she was holding my right hand. And I looked over to the other side of my left, and I saw all those entities there, the figures, and they were just standing there, not disappointed, but almost as if they just understood it's okay. And so I come back and I open my eyes, and there's this lady she's got a mask over her face. She had a hat on. She was dressed in scrubs, like blue sort of, I don't know what they wear in theatres and stuff, but we were in the Navy ship, and she's kept saying to me, "It's okay, darling, you're here now, you're here, you're back." And slowly, when I regained consciousness and could understand where I was actually lying on the floor, and they'd put over a plastic blanket on me that was pumping in warm air to try and bring my body temperature back. And so this took a while, and my body temperature came back, and they said, "Are you okay?" And I said, "Yeah, I'm fine." So I went back down to my my rack, my bed, my bunk, and lay down. I had to strap yourself in because the ship was going up so high with the waves and then come crashing down that you had to strap yourself into the bunk. And I remember thinking, what just happened? Like, that was quite bizarre. What was all that about? And it was as if it was something I'd read in a book or maybe watched on a movie very briefly, but it seemed to have lasted a long time.
Okay, let me ask you a couple of questions and we'll go on to what happened after. This voice that you heard that you described as really calm and soothing, was that the woman's voice the whole time, or was it more of like a voice from God at some point, or was it her just coming through to wherever you were?
Yeah, perfect question. So it was her coming through. I felt there was no voices in that transition stage. It was just feelings of welcome home, feelings of excitement. Yes, we can be together again. And it was all of the entities there, but it was something so much bigger as well. So it felt like I had returned home to a massive family gathering, and they were all excited. And it was like the big grandpa at the top of the head of the table was there, and everyone else, but it wasn't language. It was just this feeling of absolute acceptance, and her voice pierced through.
And did you recognize any of those beings, or was it all through this feeling?
All through this feeling, and the beings were not from this life. It was as if it may have been, some of them may have been, because I do past life regression with clients now, so I understand that it may have been from different times on this planet, but it was also from other places. So if we understand that Hubble telescope takes photographs of hundreds of billions of galaxies around us, you can understand that we've been other places as well. And I felt that I could connect with them, and they were from other places, not here. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. And and I know you're trying to figure out how to interpret all these feelings, but you said it felt like coming home. So did they feel like family, or like some kind of angelic beings that you didn't know, or you somehow knew them?
Definitely, I definitely knew them.
Okay.
I definitely knew them. It was from other times that I knew them from, but not this life. So it was other planets, other beings, wherever, but it was definitely a connection there. But it wasn't only the connection with those ones there. Do you know what I mean? I felt like I was connected to everything, much bigger than them, but they were there as like the welcoming party at the start. And it gave me huge calmness, huge understanding and acceptance. And many of us can become fearful of death or transitioning to that other side, but after that experience, I understood that there's just no hatred there. There's no ego. There's nothing. There's just intense love. And so I've become quite calm with everything now and understand that this experience and so many others after that was all happened for a reason, which is my purpose to understand. And now I do what I do. But there was no voices there. It was much more sophisticated and complex on all feeling and emotion. The voice that I heard was her cutting through all of that, coming from a different direction.
Right.
And I suppose if just talking about it now, because we're putting a fair bit of energy into this, it was as if that's all because I'm 54, but at the time this happened, which was 20 years ago, I'd say I was 34 years old. At the time it happened, all I knew was language. So I could relate to it, and it was as if, oh, okay, there's something I can relate to. And so I sort of felt like I was following what I already knew instead of what's all this feeling stuff, you know what I mean? And so it probably gave me more confidence to come back to her voice rather than going where I was going. So I think you might have answered something there for me. I felt like I wasn't in control at all, but just talking about it, maybe that's what brought me back, was the fact that I felt familiar with a voice, and that's why I chose to come back. That's really opened my mind up to something there.
Well, I think that's so beautiful, the feelings of welcome home. And that means something different to everybody, but let's picture what the very best meaning of that could be.
And that was all that there was. There was just all the very best of everything that you haven't even experienced. Happiness in this life, the experience of joy and happiness, and such intense love. And, when you think of someone that you could not live without and you have that swelling in your heart, it was like that, but magnified a million times more, because I felt I was connected with everything out there that felt like that. So it's wherever it is, and whether we all go out there together and hang around the same area, I don't know, but it's nothing to be afraid of. But we're here for a purpose. We're here for a reason. And it's what I found after all of this, and we'll talk about it in a second if we've got time, if we've still got some time, on what our purpose is and why we go through such significant challenges, depression, anxiety, happiness, is because that part of us outside of, this is my understanding anyway, outside of this life this is what we want us to experience. And it all started making sense after that.
So if you could encapsulate it into a nutshell, a one or two sentences, why would you say we are here on earth? What's our purpose?
Well, what I found, it might take a couple more than one or two sentences, but what I found was that time didn't exist. There was no time out there. We've created time here, yeah? The sun, the moon, it goes around this world, but out there, there's no world that's much bigger than that. There's universal connection. So it was as if time did not exist. It was just love and happiness. I think we come in here to experience limitations, and during those limitations, or the limited time, I should say, is we need to experience whatever we've chosen to experience prior to coming here. So the challenges, we say good times and bad times. Now I don't see anything as being a bad. It's just a challenge that I am here this time to try and overcome. And then it's allowed me to turn my entire vision around on positive and negative, where negativity doesn't exist if I don't want it to. I can create, and then I've studied a lot of quantum theory, quantum mechanics, where we are creators at that state before this life. The negativity comes from other people, other environments, whatever has been created by man. Beyond that, negativity doesn't exist. They're just challenges. They're things for us to learn from. And I understand we're here to learn, we're here to love, and we're here to teach. So to sum it up in a couple of sentences is a bit hard, but I found that we've chosen this. This is why we're here. We're here to experience it. What we think is real is only, it's like we're in a fishbowl living out the life of a fish, where there's bigger worlds outside of it, or this bigger part of energy, universal energy, quantum, is outside of it, all looking in, just seeing what we're doing. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Okay. I could spend a whole nother hour with you, and we may come back to you in a few months and do that. This has been really enjoyable. I want to hear just the sort of the postlude on what happened. So just for people, if they're kind of scratching their heads going, wait, did this really happen? So Greg's on this Navy ship, which runs over him. How big is this ship, roughly? How many feet long, meters long?
I don't know, maybe 120 meters long, maybe. It's like a frigate. It's a Navy frigate. So it's like, you've got big ships. It's got a big gun on the front, and it's got torpedo tubes out the side and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So like nearly 400 feet long. So that runs you over, and then your rescue boats decide to run you over too, just for good measure. And you survive all that. They get you on board. They warm you up. And I would think they would keep you in some kind of a sick bay hospital on the ship thing and watch you all night. But they just, hey, go to your bunk, strap yourself in. You're good to go. And then the next day they probably helicoptered you back to Australia and put a drink with an umbrella in it by you and said, hey, enjoy the next few weeks, right? Is that what happened?
Oh, no. I'll jump in quickly there. No, actually 6 hours later, I was in a helicopter, jumping out of the helicopter, landing on another ship. And we took that ship and we sailed it back. So it was as if nothing happened. It was just a story. And then I went through my military career. I left, I joined the police. I went through a lot of trauma, I suppose, as a policeman. But what I found is what I found at that time, at that NDE, is that when your body goes under stress, everything slowed down. Now, whether I had experienced that and connected with it at the time of my NDE, which then allowed me to use it as a policeman, everything would slow down and I'd be able to retain all the information, who was where, what was happening, and have massive descriptions on what people look like, their skin color, their eye color, whatever, because my world would slow down and I was becoming more open to perceive what was going on around me. So that was okay. Went through that, left police, got into real estate, did really, really well. But then all of a sudden, I was driving into a car park, an underground car park, where it gets dark. And we're at the little boom gate to pay your money and go in. And I had that same feeling. I flashed back, and that blackness, that black liquid starts coming over my eyes again. And I start going through the same experience 12 years later. And so I panic, obviously. I'm dying again. And it's as if I was reliving it. And I went through the fight, flight, freeze mode. I thought, this time I'm getting the hell out. I leave my car there and I run for my life. And then this manifested and got worse and more and happened more and more and more. And it got so bad for so many years, I was going to psychiatrists, trying to work out why I was reliving this moment and getting triggered. And it gotten so bad I couldn't enter into shopping centres with my kids. If I did not see an exit, I couldn't go. And that would breed self-doubt, anxiety, depression, suicidal, trying to escape it. And they'd say, oh, Dad's having another incident. And it was like
everything that goes with PTSD you were experiencing.
Yeah. And it wasn't until I discovered unconscious mind coaching and hypnotherapy that fixed it so quickly. That's why I do what I do now, because it was able to fix me. I studied intensely, and now that's what I do. I help. It originally started with veterans, but now civilians, everyone, I'm helping all around the world release the emotions that they attach to those events, because that's all it is. Eric, there's no good and bad that happens in the world. There's just things that happen. We make them good or bad by the emotions we attach to them. So if they're bad and they come back and they're haunting me, I can go back today, well after the event, unconsciously, because it remembers everything we've been through, your unconscious, and we release the emotions attached to it, and it no longer bothers us today. PTSD, depression, anxiety, self-doubt, toxic relationships, all these things I now understand. And so that was why I had to go through what I went through, is for me to go through the stages and steps to now be able to assist humans release all the stuff from their past so they can have a happier future. So if anyone's listening to this and says, well, why am I going through all this crap? Why is so many bad things happening to me? That's for a reason. Look at what the reason is. Look at a positive, turn it into a positive, and then you can start living your true purpose, because everyone goes through something different, don't they? And if I could sum it up, that's what I would suggest, is that everyone's here for a reason, for a purpose. If we stop looking at it as bad things and negatively, as if, why is this happening? Even after the years of PTSD and all that stuff, now I can help people that are going through the same thing. So whatever you've lived, Eric, or anyone that's listening, there's a reason it's happening. Look for what it is, and you might be able to help others that are going through worse than you. So I hope you enjoyed my story.
Oh my goodness. It was amazing. I was on the edge of my seat, and I could literally picture what was going on. You are good at telling it.
Oh, thank you. I think now, because I'm so connected with that on that unconscious level, it all makes sense now. And so I can dissect it without getting too emotional about it, because I release those emotions. I do remember that voice, though, that brought me back, and it was that's the same thing that still gets me choked up when I tell the story. But I've so enjoyed spending time with you and your listeners, and I'm always here, to help everyone if they want to reach out.
We will put in our show notes how to get a hold of you if anybody wants to, and they can find those attached to this episode. And Greg, thanks again. I wish we had another hour to spend with you. We'll do it down the road sometime, but awesome time tonight. Thank you.
Eric, it's an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much. Sending you lots of love and energy. That's all it's about now, and that's what I understand.
I love it, and I need it. Thank you. If you have had a round-trip death experience, we would love to hear about it. Send an email to eric@roundtripdeath.com. And lastly, if you have found this program uplifting, if it's given you just a little more hope in the future, share it with a friend, hit that follow button, and take a few seconds to write us a review. Until next time, I wish you everything good that you're looking for in this life and the next.